That first-class ticket had been paid for with 2 years of calculation, billions of dollars, and the pride of a woman who had been underestimated all her life. But that morning, under the cold lights of JFK Airport, Layla Montgomery was about to realize that power isn't about where you sit. It's about how you rise when others try to pull you down. At 7 in the morning, the flagship lounge of Sierra Pacific Air shimmered in a soft silver light. The scent of fine leather mingled with the gentle fragrance of bergamot, and the faint clatter of suitcase wheels echoed across the polished floor. In the far corner, Layla sat alone. Her long, curly hair was neatly tied back, her ash-gray cashmere sweater draped elegantly over her shoulders, paired with tailored joggers from Loro Piana. She didn't need a suit to prove her class. When you're a female tech billionaire, simplicity itself becomes a statement of power. The screen of her tablet glowed before her, reflecting the steely focus in her eyes. Lines of code and financial graphs danced across the display reports, scrolling endlessly. She barely heard anything beyond the rhythm of her own heartbeat, steady, controlled, mechanical. This flight wasn't just a trip. It was the final move in a chess game worth more than $11 billion, the acquisition of the Aero United Group. For 2 years, Layla had been redrawing the future of aviation through data artificial intelligence and vision beyond imagination. Helios Innovations, the company she had built from a one-bedroom apartment, was about to become the controlling shareholder of Aero United. And within that empire lay its fading jewel, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, Sierra Pacific Air, the airline she was flying with today. She had chosen a commercial flight instead of her private jet, not to save money, but to feel the real heartbeat of the beast she was about to own. It was a test flight, a secret inspection. She wanted to see how Sierra Pacific treated its passengers, how its people behaved when they didn't know who sat in seat 1A. Her phone buzzed. The name Michael Chief Operating Officer appeared on the screen. "The transfer documents are ready," his voice came through. "The Aero United board is waiting for your confirmation within 24 hours. Are you sure you don't want to take your private jet?" Layla smirked slightly and typed a short reply. "Commercial. Need to see the ground." She hung up, leaned back and sighed. This flight was a reminder of where she came from. Once an ordinary passenger, once dismissed by receptionists, once asked by investors, "Who's backing you?" Now those same people worked for companies sustained by her innovations. A female voice echoed through the lounge speakers. "Sierra Pacific Air now invites first-class passengers on flight Sierra Papa Alpha 227 to San Francisco at Gate Bravo 42. Layla closed her tablet, slipped it into her Hermes bag, and stood. For a brief moment, she paused. The light fell across her face, revealing the calm fierceness of someone who had already tasted humiliation and turned it into armor. She didn't know that within minutes, the boarding gate would open to one of the most defining tests of her life. Gate B42 was busier than usual. A middle-aged man in a navy suit was complaining on his phone. 2 young travelers were taking selfies beneath the sign. Layla stepped into the priority line and held out her phone to scan the boarding pass. The scanner beeped green, a flawless confirmation tone, but then the gate agent's eyes hesitated. Brian Keller, 33, pale and tired, his tie slightly askew, read the information again, looked at Layla, then back at the screen. In an instant, she recognized that look, the one she had seen 100 times before. Doubt. "It seems there's been a seat duplication, ma'am," he said, his voice distracted, avoiding her gaze. Seat 1A is already assigned to one of our Platinum members. It's probably just a system error. I can move you to 12B in Premium Economy and process a refund afterward." The air around them seemed to thicken. People in line started to glance over. Layla felt her heartbeat slow, then pound again, a mix of embarrassment and anger tightening in her chest. "My seat, 1A, was confirmed and fully paid," she said, her tone calm, but each word sharp as glass. "I don't need a refund. I need the seat I purchased." Brian forced a polite smile, the kind people wear when they think they're being reasonable. "I understand. But in duplicate cases, policy prioritizes Platinum members. I hope you understand I really don't want to argue." For a few seconds, there was only silence between them. His words dropped into her ears, cold and metallic. Policy. She knew every line of Sierra Pacific's regulations, and what he had just said was a blatant lie. He didn't see the CEO of the company about to buy his airline. He only saw a black woman, dressed simply someone who didn't look like she belonged in seat 1A. A sharp ache flickered in Layla's eyes, not because of the seat, but because of memory. She remembered the day she went to the bank for a startup loan, and the guard asked, "Who are you delivering for?" She remembered her first investor meeting, when a fund manager sneered, "If you don't have a white partner behind you, I'm not signing." And now, after 20 years, after billions of dollars and thousands of jobs she had created, she was still being treated as someone who didn't belong. Layla's hand tightened around her bag strap. Every instinct told her to reveal her power to throw her business card, reading Chief Executive Officer Helios Innovations in his face. But she restrained herself. Not yet. Not here. She looked straight into Brian's eyes, her anger fading into a cold stillness. "You're making a mistake," she said softly, each word carved in ice. "A mistake you'll never forget." She stepped aside and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved swiftly, typing a single message. "Get Richard Halverson on the line. Now." Outside the glass window, snow began to fall in thin, delicate flakes. No one at the airport knew that right there, at Gate B42, a game worth billions was about to turn in a matter of minutes. And the woman who had just been humiliated with one single call had the power to change the fate of an entire airline. Layla took a deep breath. Amid the echo of boarding calls and rolling suitcases, she could feel it clearly. The storm had begun. In Layla Montgomery's world, mistakes don't exist, only lessons paid for in blood money or honor. And Brian Keller had just crossed that line. He still didn't realize that the woman standing before him wasn't just a first-class passenger. She was the one about to sign the document that would turn his entire company into her property. But to Brian, Layla was merely a difficult case, one he wanted to handle quickly so he could move on with his shift. "Ma'am, please step to the right," he said, his voice laced with forced politeness. "I'll call a supervisor right away, but I'll need you to move out of the line. Other passengers need to board." Layla didn't move. Her gaze was sharp as ice, though her tone remained calm and steady. "You don't need to call anyone," she said. "I've paid. I've confirmed my ticket. Everything is valid. If there's an error, it's in your system, not mine." A man behind her let out a low whistle. The line began to stir with murmurs. Some eyes were curious, others irritated. A blonde woman whispered to her husband, "She probably bought a discounted ticket and wants to sit in 1A. The words sliced through the air and Layla heard them clearly. Brian rolled his eyes and signaled to a rumpled man in a business suit nearby Paul Whitman, a Platinum Elite passenger. "Mr. Whitman, just a moment, please. There's a small issue. I'll sort out your seat right away." Paul glanced at Layla from head to toe, his lips curling into a half smile. "I'm guessing it's a system error, or a human one," he said, shrugging his tone, joking but not really. "Either way, I'll be in seat 1A from now." Layla looked at him without a word. In her eyes, that smirk was the face of a system old, entitled, and convinced of its own righteousness. "Mr. Keller," she said slowly, "I'm asking you to check your system again." "Right now?" Brian sighed, irritation breaking through. "I already did. And I don't have time for this. You have two options. Accept seat 12B or wait for the 11:40 flight. You're holding up the boarding process." He reached out, intending to take her phone to help with the reassignment. In an instinctive motion, Layla pulled her hand back, holding her phone close to her chest. A heavy silence dropped between them, like a curtain of steel. "Don't touch my things," she said quietly. "You don't have that right." Brian pulled his hand back, awkward and flustered, forcing another uneasy smile. "You're misunderstanding. I'm just trying to help." "No," Layla interrupted. "You're not helping. You're commanding." Something in her tone made Brian falter. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't lashed out, but the weight of her words filled the space around them. Still with the crowd watching, he couldn't let himself appear weak. Folding his arms, he exhaled sharply. "I've done all I can. If you don't cooperate, I'll have security escort you out." A chill spread through Layla's body. Not fear, but that old, familiar disgust. She had once been kicked out of a conference room for being on the wrong floor. Once mistaken for an assistant when she was the founder herself. And now she was hearing that same line again, the echo of her past clawing at her dignity. Layla drew a deep breath. "Mr. Keller," she said softly, "I'm not leaving. And I promise you, in 5 minutes, you'll wish all you had to do was change my seat." She stepped back, took out her phone, and dialed William Price Helios's head of legal. William, her voice low but firm, contact Richard Halverson at Aero United immediately. "Tell him this: the CEO of their parent company has just been denied boarding on the flight Sierra Papa Alpha 227 due to a so-called system error. I want them to know that right now." William didn't ask a single question. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. She ended the call, her eyes never leaving Brian. He was pretending to look busy, typing furiously on the keyboard, as if that could restore his sense of control. 3 minutes later, the intercom phone on the gate counter rang sharply. A woman's voice came through, urgent and rapid. Brian listened, and his face turned pale. He glanced at Layla, stammering, "Yes, I understand. Yes, she's still here. I'll take care of it immediately." When he hung up, sweat glistened on his forehead. "Ms. Montgomery?" he said, his voice trembling slightly. "It appears there really was a system error. I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. You may board now." Layla said nothing. She looked at him for a single moment, her eyes not angry, just empty, an emptiness that made him feel smaller than any reprimand ever could. She held her phone to the scanner again. The familiar beep sounded, and this time no one dared question it. As she walked away, whispers rippled behind her. "She looks fierce. I think she's someone important." She didn't look back. Only one thought crossed her mind in her own cold inner voice. "This is why I don't fly commercial." Walking through the jet bridge, Layla glanced through the glass window at the Boeing 787 resting quietly under the pale morning sky. its silver fuselage glinting in the light. A strange feeling rose in her chest, a blend of pride and deep disappointment. She was about to own that metal bird, to command thousands of employees like Brian, hundreds of crew members like the one she was about to meet. But was power enough to heal the sting of being diminished inside the aircraft? Linda Whitaker, the senior purser of Sierra Pacific, was checking the first-class manifest. She adjusted her perfectly styled blonde hair, offering a polite smile to Paul Whitman, the most frequent flyer of Flight 227. She had no idea that her world was about to collapse within minutes. Layla stepped into the cabin, leaving Brian behind, still trembling from that mysterious call from upper management. He didn't understand what had just happened, only that a creeping sense of dread had settled over him. Meanwhile, Layla sat down in seat 1A, her seat, and slowly fastened her seatbelt. She looked around, brown leather seats, white walls, soft jazz drifting through the cabin speakers. No one on board knew that the woman who had just sat down was the future owner of the airline. But when Layla closed her eyes, there was no joy of victory in her heart, only a quiet question. If they knew who I was, would they treat me any differently? A cold draft slipped through the cabin curtain, making it flutter gently. Outside, the sun was rising, painting gold across Layla's eyes. And somewhere thousands of miles away, in a glass conference room, the transfer of ownership for Aero United Group was being prepared for signature. Flight Sierra Papa Alpha 227 hadn't yet taken off, but the battle had already begun. A battle not just over a seat, but over dignity, power, and prejudice. Layla whispered to herself, "All right, let's see how they treat their passengers." Then she opened her eyes. The storm was coming. The steady click of high heels echoed across the first-class aisle as Linda Whitaker, Sierra Pacific's veteran purser, appeared as if she had stepped out of an aviation magazine, blonde hair curled to perfection, lips painted a deep red, a navy uniform without a single wrinkle. Yet behind that courteous smile was the gaze of someone who had spent decades serving important people and had learned to decide who deserved that service. Layla looked up as Linda stopped in front of her. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Montgomery." Layla answered her voice, quiet but firm. Linda flicked her eyes to the e-ticket in her hand, then back up her gaze, skimming over the grey sweater, the joggers, the white sneakers. A beat of silence, and her smile shifted from warm to forced. "R1A," Linda said, drawing out the words. "Yes, I see it, but it appears there's a slight mix-up." Layla raised her eyes. "There is no mix-up. This is my seat." The tone stilled the cabin. The men with gleaming metal watches in seats 1B and 2A pretended to read their newspapers, but their eyes never left the two women. Paul Whitman, the man who had tested her seat, lounged back a glass of orange juice in his hand. Linda turned to him, her voice honey-soft. "Mr. Whitman, I'm sorry for the small inconvenience. We'll take care of it right away. Please relax." Then she faced Layla again, her expression hardening. "Ms. Montgomery, I'll find you another seat, still in first class, very comfortable. We would not want to delay the flight." Would we? Layla stayed where she was, eyes straight ahead. "I don't need a comfortable seat. I need my seat." Her voice was so cold and precise that a few passengers shivered. Linda exhaled, the artificial smile disappearing. "You're causing a disturbance. You do realize that we have procedures, and I am the one responsible here." Layla tilted her head. "Procedures, you say, are the procedures to trick a passenger who paid for first class and push them to a middle seat in premium economy. The once quiet cabin snapped taut like wire. Paul set his glass down and frowned. I fly this route every week. I've never seen anything like this. You should listen to the crew. They're just doing their jobs. Layla turned to him, a humorless glint in her eyes. And perhaps you're used to being served first, even when it is wrong, aren't you? Color rose in Paul's face. But Linda cut in, voice stern. Now then, Ms. Montgomery, let's not make everyone uncomfortable. I can call security if you continue. Security, Layla repeated with a soft laugh. You plan to remove me from the seat I purchased because you think I don't fit here. Linda froze, then dropped her voice, contempt flashing in her eyes. Listen, I don't know where you got this ticket, but I won't allow an unknown passenger to disrupt my cabin. If you don't move, I will call the captain. In that instant, something detonated silently in Layla's mind like a blown fuse. Not anger, but a total clarity. She had just seen the root disease of this company attitude. The attitude that valued appearances over worth, loyalty tiers over dignity. And she knew right now she would not stay silent. Layla drew a deep breath and rose slowly. Her eyes never left Linda's. Call him. Bring your captain here. And while you're at it, you may call your union representative as well. I think both will be needed. Linda gave a thin smile. I don't need a union to deal with someone like you. Oh, you will. Layla replied, her tone light and cold. She pulled out her phone and tapped quickly. On the screen, the word execute appeared. The order to sign the transfer of ownership had just been sent. No one in the cabin understood what was happening, but the air had shifted. The way Layla stood, the look in her eyes, this was not a passenger, but someone who held the fate of the entire aircraft in her hands. 5 minutes later, the cockpit door opened. Captain Thomas Reed. 54 silver-haired, his face, carved by years of flying, stepped out with irritation. What is going on, Linda? We are already 10 minutes late. Linda pointed at Layla, lowering her voice. She refuses to leave the seat. I've asked repeatedly. She even threatened to call the union. The captain looked at Layla, his tone authoritative. Ma'am, I am the captain of this flight. All instructions from the purser must be followed. If you do not comply, I will have to ask you to leave the aircraft. Layla did not blink. She looked straight at him and spoke slowly. Before you say anything else, I suggest you check your official communications device. There is an internal notice from Aero United Group sent about 4 minutes ago. The captain frowned and opened the company tablet. The screen lit up with a headline, Urgent Notice. Helios Innovations has completed the acquisition of 62% of Aero United Group. Effective immediately, Ms. Layla Montgomery is appointed chair of the Interim Oversight Committee. As his eyes reached that line, his expression changed. Standing behind him, Linda had not yet grasped it. Captain, what is it? She whispered. He looked up, fear now plain in his gaze. Ms. Montgomery is Ms. Montgomery, he stammered. Layla calmly fastened her belt and spoke softly, just loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. Yes, it is me. And yes, I am the person who just bought this company. The air froze. Every eye turned to her. Paul Whitman clenched his glass fingers. Trembling lips parted without a sound. Layla faced Linda. Ms. Whitaker, she said, her voice, like steel, effective this moment you are suspended from duty. You may gather your belongings and leave the aircraft. As for Captain Reed, you will remain, but await a review of your command judgment. I want this flight to depart with the reserve crew within 10 minutes. Linda blanched. You can't, I just did. The words fell like a hammer. No one dared argue. Hands shaking, Linda gathered her papers, eyes wild with confusion. As she stepped out of the cabin, Layla watched her go, not triumphant, only solemn. She knew she had just triggered an earthquake, and that the ground beneath all of them would not be still again. The captain nodded, his voice rough. "We'll arrange a new crew, ma'am." Layla answered only, "Good. And remember, change begins with how we treat people." The cabin door closed. Outside, the snow had stopped. Inside, the Boeing 787 thrummed softly, engines spooling up wind, whispering along the wings. Layla leaned back and closed her eyes. She had just taught them a lesson in power. Yet deep in her chest, something remained unsettled, a faint sense that another storm, larger and darker, was waiting ahead. 5 minutes. 5 minutes for an airline to change ownership. 5 minutes for a woman to prove that sometimes power doesn't need to shout, it only needs to be pressed by a single fingertip. Outside, the thin snow was melting on the glass of JFK Airport, but inside the first-class cabin of Sierra Pacific Air, the air had grown heavy, almost suffocating. Captain Thomas Reed still stood frozen before seat 1A, his hand gripping the company tablet tightly. He'd reread the announcement, hoping he had made a mistake. He hadn't. Everything was clear, cold, absolute. Helios Innovations, founded by Layla Montgomery, had officially taken control of Aero United Group, the parent company of Sierra Pacific Air, and Layla was now the chairwoman of the Interim Oversight Committee. In simpler terms, from this moment on, everyone on the flight, including him, worked for her. Layla remained seated in her chair. She didn't need to stand, didn't need to raise her voice. She only needed to look. Her gaze swept through the cabin like a blade, cold and sharp. "Captain Reed," she said, her tone low and perfectly controlled now. "You understand why I told you to check your device, don't you?" The captain swallowed hard, his voice trembling. Yes, ma'am." "It seems there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Layla interrupted, calm but cutting. "What I do understand is that men like you are used to not checking anything. You're used to believing that only people who look like you belong in this seat." No one spoke. The cabin fell silent, except for the distant hum of the engines. Layla turned her eyes to Linda Whitaker, still standing motionless, her face pale as paper. "Mrs. Whitaker." Layla said each word deliberate. "You called me a troublemaker. You threatened to remove me from this flight for daring to ask for what I paid for. And you did it because you believed I would stay quiet, because I don't look like someone who belongs in seat 1A. Isn't that right?" Linda's lips trembled as she tried to speak. "I was just following protocol." Layla tilted her head slightly, a cold smile touching her lips. "No, you were following habit. And now I'm going to teach you the difference between protocol and prejudice." She lifted her phone. The screen glowed with the words, "Execute confirmed." At that very moment, an automated message was sent across dozens of internal inboxes throughout the Aero United system. The signal traveled through the corporate network. Control centers, operations departments, even the legal office at the San Francisco headquarters received it simultaneously. Within minutes, the management of the entire conglomerate shifted to Helios Innovations. There was no thunder in the sky, but for Sierra Pacific, lightning had just struck in broad daylight. Layla placed her phone calmly on the table and fixed her eyes on Linda. "You have 5 minutes to gather your belongings and leave the aircraft. As of this moment, you are no longer an employee of Sierra Pacific Air or of any subsidiary of Aero United." Linda stumbled back, breathing fast. "You can't do this. I've been with this airline for 30 years. And in those 30 years, Layla cut her off. How many times have you judged people by their appearance? How many times have you made passengers feel like they didn't belong here? I don't need your answer. I just need you to leave. Captain Reed still hadn't moved. Layla turned her gaze to him. As for you, Captain, you will complete this flight, but treat this as your final evaluation. I want a new crew. I want a full written report on Mrs. Whitaker's behavior and the staff at Gate Bravo 42. And I want this plane airborne within 10 minutes. He nodded shakily. Yes, ma'am. I understand. Paul Whitman, the platinum passenger, had remained completely silent. Now he rose awkwardly, stammering, I didn't know who you were. I'm sorry if I... Layla didn't turn her head. Mr. Whitman, I don't need your apology. I just need you to do the right thing. She pointed toward his carry-on bag. That's my seat. Paul's face flushed red as he stood, nearly stumbling as he hurried toward the rear rows. A few other passengers bowed their heads, avoiding her eyes. They knew they had just witnessed something rare, real power, quiet, unquestionable, and undeniable. As Linda walked out, tears streaming uncontrollably, Layla said nothing. She watched her go, her face, neither vengeful nor proud, only somber. There was something in her eyes like a woman punishing herself for having to punish others. 5 minutes later, a new crew entered the cabin. They bowed, slightly timid, no one daring to speak. Captain Reed turned back, his voice rough. We're ready, Ms. Montgomery. Layla nodded once. Take off. The engines roared louder. The Boeing trembled, then lifted off the runway, climbing into the freezing New York sky. At 10,000 meters, the morning light poured across Layla's face, glinting in her eyes like silver. She sat in silence. Untouched champagne on the tray, no appetite for the breakfast menu. Beside her, her tablet lit up with a message from Michael, the Chief Operating Officer of Helios. Done. Ownership transfer confirmed. All yours now. She read the words 3 times. All yours now. Everything. The numbers, the contracts, the names that once inspired fear was now in her hands. Yet instead of triumph, a hollow emptiness spread through her chest. Layla turned to the window. The sea of clouds stretched endlessly serene to the point of deception. She remembered Linda's pale face, Brian's trembling hands, Captain Reed's terrified eyes. She had taught them a lesson. Yes, but had she just taught herself that power could erase humiliation? A new flight attendant approached softly. Would you like breakfast, ma'am? We have caviar and Ethiopian coffee. Layla shook her head gently. Just water. She reopened her financial report on the tablet, trying to lose herself in the comfort of numbers, a world where no one judged by skin or voice. But the words blurred, dissolving into the sound of wind rushing past the window. Somewhere inside, she knew every victory comes with a price, and today she had just paid the first installment. The aircraft sliced through layers of cloud sunlight gleaming against Layla's eyes. Somewhere deep inside her, a voice from the past whispered, "Justice doesn't always require power, Layla. But power always pays the price for justice." She slowly closed her eyes. Below, the command systems of an airline empire trembled. Above the clouds, one woman had just altered its entire course in only 5 minutes. The first-class cabin was drowned in silence, the kind of silence that feels like an explosion no one heard. Captain Thomas Reed still stood there, tablet in hand, his eyes drifting along the rows of seats, as if trying to make sense of a world that had just flipped upside down. 10 minutes ago, he had absolute authority over this Boeing. Now he had only one authority left, the authority to take orders. Layla Montgomery said nothing. She sat still in seat 1A, her back against the chair, her gaze turned toward the window. The morning light slid across her cheek, revealing a calm so composed it was almost chilling. She didn't need to act powerful. Her silence was power. Captain Reed took a slow breath and nodded. "Mrs. Montgomery, we've arranged a reserve crew. The previous team will be handled according to your directives." Layla turned slightly, her voice even and composed. "Good. Let's treat this as the beginning of a new era, one where passengers are respected, regardless of how they look." Beside her, Paul Whitman, the man who had once taken her seat, sat motionless in row 2, his eyes fixed on the floor. The glass of orange juice in his hand trembled, droplets falling onto his polished shoes. He had never imagined a day like this, witnessing a black woman, humiliated only minutes ago now, holding the power to decide the fate of an entire airline. A new flight attendant, young and visibly nervous, approached Layla. "Would you like anything else, ma'am? We've just replaced the service crew." Layla shook her head lightly. "Nothing. I only need professionalism." The words made the young woman blush and bow quickly. Outside, the Boeing began to taxi, engines humming softly, the wheels streaking a white trail across the tarmac. As the aircraft lifted off, pressure shifted and the metal frame vibrated, singing its quiet greeting to the sky. In that moment, Layla felt a surge of electricity run down her spine. Power! But beneath that pulse was another wave, cold, bitter, and hollow. 2 hours later, the plane cruised steadily at 35,000 feet. Soft daylight filtered through the window, glinting off the walnut table. Layla opened her tablet and received a notification: transfer complete. All operational control under Helios Innovations. Beneath it was a message from Michael, the Chief Operating Officer of Helios. "Congratulations, Madam Chair. Welcome to your new empire." She stared at the words for a long time. Empire. A single word, heavy with meaning. Yet instead of satisfaction, her heart felt weighted with lead. She had just saved a brand on the verge of collapse, resurrecting it in her own hands. But the way it had unfolded through humiliation, tears, and the fear in others' eyes made her victory feel clouded. Layla leaned back and closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she saw the face of Linda Whittaker, pale, trembling tears streaming down. Not the face of an enemy, but of a person, fragile, flawed human. She wondered, had she corrected a wrong or created a far greater one? Captain Layla's voice broke the silence, calm but firm. Reed turned around. "Yes, Mrs. Montgomery. After landing, I want a full report on the incident, including the name of the employee at Gate Bravo 42. Brian Keller, ma'am," Reed replied. Layla nodded, her tone turning cold. "Note this. Terminate his contract effective immediately." There was a brief silence before she added, "And Captain, I don't want to see fear in your eyes. Remember, I'm not here to hunt mistakes. I'm here to fix a system that has forgotten how to treat people." The captain lowered his head. "I understand, ma'am." The plane continued to glide through the clouds. The midday light slowly bathed the cabin in a soft golden hue. Everyone seemed to breathe a little easier now. But the silence that filled the air wasn't peace. It was the stillness before a greater storm, one none of them could see coming. When the wheels touched the runway in San Francisco, Layla's phone buzzed violently. A message from Monica Alvarez, head of PR, urgent. "Do not post anything. Go dark. We have a situation." Layla frowned and called immediately. "Monica, what happened?" On the other end, Monica's voice came fast, breathless. "It's about Linda Whittaker. Her daughter Ashley just posted a video online. It's going viral. It shows her mother crying after being fired. It's spreading like wildfire. Layla fell silent for a few seconds. In her mind, she could see it. The tear-streaked face of the middle-aged woman, the trembling shoulders, the dim light of an airport cafe. Monica continued. The girl says her mother was humiliated and fired by a heartless CEO over a seat. The video has nearly 1 million views in 2 hours. The hashtags Justice for Linda and Boycott Helios are trending. The press is already calling me. Layla gripped the armrest, her knuckles turning white. What about the company? Stocks dipped slightly, but PR is the real problem. Everyone's sharing the clip. They see Linda's tears, but no one sees what she said to you. A chill ran down Layla's spine. She had reclaimed her dignity, and now the world was condemning her with a 47-second video. Do nothing, Layla said quietly. No statements, no press responses. Wait for me at the office. Layla Monica hesitated. The media doesn't sleep. People are demanding an apology. Layla closed her eyes. If they want a villain, I'll show them one worthy of the name. Outside San Francisco International Airport, a limousine was waiting. As Layla stepped out, the flashes began. Reporters from KTVU, Reuters, and Business Insider surged forward like wolves scenting blood. Mrs. Montgomery, did you really fire an employee mid-flight? Do you have any comment for the public? Do you think you went too far? Layla didn't stop. She walked straight ahead, her sunglasses hiding her eyes, but not the rising tide of anger in the crowd. One voice shouted, "You made a woman lose her job. She's crying online because of you." Another jeered, "Don't call yourself a feminist if you have to crush someone to prove your point." The car door slammed shut. Inside, Layla sat in silence, staring into the void before her. She was used to media attacks, but she had never felt so misunderstood. She whispered to herself, justice doesn't live in the camera lens. It lives in the truth that only a few have the courage to see. Outside, San Francisco glowed beneath the setting sun. Inside the car, Layla Montgomery knew the storm had only just begun. Outside the headquarters of Helios Innovations, gray rain fell over San Francisco. Raindrops tapped against the glass like a slow drumbeat to a verdict being read word by word, sentence by sentence, across thousands of phone screens around the world. The name Layla Montgomery flooded social media. In the video, spreading at lightning speed, a middle-aged woman, Linda Whitaker, sat inside an airport cafe, tears streaming down her face. Beside her was her daughter Ashley, her voice trembling but clear. 30 years of service, and my mother was fired by an arrogant CEO over a seat. The image spread like a virus. Comments poured in anger, outrage, fury. Who does she think she is? This is the true face of the ultra-rich. She fired a woman supporting her sick husband. She's a devil in a suit. Within 12 hours, the hashtag Justice for Linda surpassed headlines about elections and war. From Twitter to TikTok, from CNN to the Daily Mail, Layla became the symbol of power stripped of humanity. Inside her office on the 42nd floor, Layla stood before the glass wall overlooking the city. Below, streams of car lights pulsed like veins, while in her chest, her heartbeat was uneven, a clash between reason and fear. Behind her, a large screen blared breaking news. Helios CEO Montgomery under fire for humiliating long-time flight attendant. Stock down 7%, unions threaten strike. Power privilege and prejudice in the skies. Layla didn't turn around, but she heard the door open. Monica Alvarez, the head of PR, entered her raincoat, still wet, her face etched with worry. "Layla, it's worse than we thought. The international press has picked it up. BBC, the New York Times, Reuters all reaching out." Layla's voice was steady. "And the Aero United board, they've called for an emergency meeting tonight," Richard Halverson said, and I quote, "We need to talk about your image." And worse, the pilots' union just declared a mass sick-out. Hundreds of flights are cancelled. Layla turned slowly, her gaze draining the room of its light. The entire system is in revolt over a 47-second video. Monica stayed quiet, then said softly, "A video, yes, but one that hit at the perfect time. The world sees the tears, not the cause." Layla nodded slightly. The world loves simple stories. One villain, one victim. They don't want the truth to have shades of grey. Her voice was hoarse. But this time, the price of grey is an entire empire. At 8 that evening, the boardroom of Aero United Group glowed bright under the lights. On the large screen, 12 faces appeared in a video call. None of them smiled. At the center of the table sat Richard Halverson, the acting chairman, the same man who had once pretended to cooperate with Helios during the acquisition. Tonight he sat upright, his eyes sharp as blades. Mrs. Montgomery Halverson began his tone calm, but edged with gunpowder. "We are facing the biggest PR disaster in this company's history." Layla crossed her arms, her tone steady. "The disaster didn't come from my actions, but from the rot in the system you built. I just exposed it." A female board member, Karen Doyle, cut in. "You didn't just expose it, you tore it apart in front of the world. You fired an employee on a plane, no HR, no documentation, no due process. And now you're the face of cruelty." Layla replied, each word hitting the table like a gavel. "Cruelty is letting discrimination live for decades and pretending it's normal. I won't apologize for demanding respect. And we, Halverson said, coldly won't apologize for protecting this corporation. Your stock fell 4%, ours 7%. The unions are threatening to strike. The media calls us the Empire of the Iron Queen. This isn't about ethics anymore. It's about economics." Layla closed her eyes for a brief second, then opened them. "What do you want?" Richard Halverson leaned forward, his voice dropping low. "A public apology and reinstatement of Mrs. Whitaker. If you refuse, the board will vote to remove your control over Aero United." The room went dead silent. Layla stared directly into the camera, her eyes blazing. "I will not apologize for doing what's right, and I will not reinstate someone who humiliated a customer because of their skin color. If the board cannot withstand public outrage, then perhaps it's the board that needs replacing." A moment of silence passed. Then Halverson gave a thin smile. "Then you've chosen your fate." The screen went black. Monica stepped closer, her face pale. "Layla, they'll strike back. They'll use the same media storm to destroy you." Layla gave a faint smile. "They don't have to. The world's already doing it for them." That night, Layla sat alone in her office. The city beyond her window blurred in the rain. She opened her laptop and saw a new email. The sender made her heart tighten. David Chen, her first investor, the man who believed in her when no one else would. "Layla, I trust you had your reasons, but power is not a hammer. It's a hand that requires precision. You may have won a battle, but you're losing the world." Layla read it again and again. The last line struck deep. "Don't let justice turn into pride, because when it does, you become no different from those who once humiliated you." She leaned back in her chair, tears falling before she even realized it. Outside, lightning flashed over the bay. In that instant, Layla understood the storm wasn't just out there. It was inside her. She had spent her life fighting to be seen, to be heard, to be respected. And now that she had everything, the world saw her in the worst way possible. The next morning, headlines screamed across every major outlet. The CEO who refuses to apologize. Nationwide strike shuts down airline. Helios loses $2.3 billion in market value in 24 hours. In the Helios boardroom, the shareholders sat in silence like statues, their eyes all turned toward Layla, the woman sitting tall dark circles under her eyes, but unshaken. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She only said one sentence, her voice rough but resolute. Justice is never cheap. But if someone has to pay the price, then I choose to pay it myself. No one answered. Only the sound of rain tapping against the glass remained steady, relentless, like the heartbeat of an empire slowly collapsing. Monday morning. On the front page of the New York Times, a headline stretched across half the page in bold black letters: the flight attendant, the female CEO, and the man in room 214. Beneath it was a photograph of a frail man lying in a hospital bed, Evo lines running along his arms. The small captions read, "Edward Whittaker, husband of the fired flight attendant, is battling ALS at a hospice facility in Maplewood, New Jersey." The article was written by Nora Bennett, an investigative journalist once nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. It wasn't sensational. It was a scalpel, sharp, cold, and precise. Nora wrote in the room marked 214, where pale light filters through thin curtains. Edward Whittaker breathes in shallow gasps. His wife, Linda, worked as a flight attendant for 30 years to pay for his treatment. The flight where she was publicly dismissed by the CEO of Helios Innovations did not just end her career. It severed the only lifeline keeping her husband alive. Nora's words didn't accuse, but each sentence cut deep, carving its way into the reader's chest. She described the details, the meager salary, the mounting medical bills, the overlapping insurance statements, the sleepless nights Linda spent beside her husband's bed. The portrait was clear, a hard-working woman destroyed by a cold and powerful CEO, painted with the elegance of tragedy and the cruelty of truth. One paragraph shook the nation. In 5 minutes, a first-class seat changed hands. In those same 5 minutes, another life began to collapse. The question is no longer who was right or wrong. The question is, can justice still be justice? If it kills compassion when the article went live, social media exploded. A second wave of outrage hit stronger, more personal. Hashtags like Save Edward, Stand with Linda and Boycott Helios flooded every platform. Within 24 hours, a crowdfunding campaign created by Linda's daughter Ashley surpassed $1.2 million. The media called it the miracle of compassion. But for Layla Montgomery, it was a storm of destiny. In the Helios office, Layla read the article to the very last line. She didn't blink. She didn't cry. Only silence, heavy, unyielding, filled the room. Every word in that article struck her like a hammer, not because Nora was wrong, but because Nora was painfully right. Linda wasn't innocent, but she wasn't evil either. And Edward, the man in room 214, did not deserve to become collateral damage in her war for justice. Layla rose from her chair and walked to the wide glass wall. Outside, San Francisco glowed in the morning sun, in stark contrast to the storm consuming her reputation. Behind her, Michael Helios's chief operating officer stepped into the room. "Layla, we have a serious problem. Bennett's article spooked the investors. They're demanding an emergency meeting. How bad? Stocks down 12%. The union's gone nationwide with the strike, and the Aero United board is preparing to vote you out of operational control. Layla turned her gaze deep and calm. Are you afraid, Michael? He said nothing. His small nod was answer enough. Don't be, Layla said quietly. I've lost everything more than once. Every time I lost, I learned to rise higher. Meanwhile, inside Aero United's boardroom, the tone was completely different, chaotic, bitter, and brimming with calculation. Richard Halverson slammed his hand on the table. We can't let one woman turn this entire company into a circus. She's turned justice into her own PR campaign. Heads nodded around him. One member spoke up. The stock's in free fall. The public hates her. This is our chance to take back control. Halverson narrowed his eyes. Then we vote. Tonight. Under the dim glow of that room, an empire prepared to overthrow the queen it had once crowned. Night fell over Helios Tower. Layla remained alone in her office. The lights were off, the only glow coming from her laptop screen. On it, a blurred image from Nora Bennett's interview played Edward Whittaker, speaking softly from his hospice bed. I'm not angry, he whispered weakly. I just hope my wife can smile again. The simplicity of his words pierced through Layla's armor. Her chest tightened heavy with guilt. She was no longer the powerful CEO. She was a woman who had once been crushed by the world and had now unintentionally crushed someone else. She asked herself, had she really been fighting for justice or just punishing the world for what it had once done to her? The question echoed inside her unanswered. At 3 in the morning, Layla's phone buzzed. A message from David Chen. Layla, the Helios board is calling an emergency vote. Please stay calm. If you fight them now, you'll lose everything. Layla read it, then smiled faintly. I already lost it, David. The only thing I have left is the truth. She opened her laptop and began typing a letter. Title statement, for those who still believe in dignity. The sound of keystrokes filled the dark room, mingling with the rain tapping against the glass. Each word fell like a heartbeat, steady, deliberate, as if written by someone preparing for an ending, or perhaps a new beginning. I do not apologize for standing up, but I regret forgetting that in the fight for dignity, humanity must come before power. I never wished for anyone to lose their job or their faith in what is right. If my actions brought pain to a family, I will take responsibility, not through words, but through action. She stopped, her eyes stinging. This wasn't a statement for the media. It was a confession for herself. Outside, dawn began to rise behind the skyline. A new day. But no one yet knew that within hours Layla Montgomery would no longer be the most powerful CEO in America. And in those same hours, she would begin another journey, the journey of a woman learning how to be human again. Somewhere far away in room 214 in New Jersey, Edward Whittaker was still breathing weakly, his hand clasped tightly around his wife's. Linda looked at him and whispered, Honey, someone just started a fund for us. He smiled faintly. Maybe there are still good people. On the hospice television, the headline about Layla still glowed red and harsh, from tech hero to symbol of arrogance. Linda turned off the TV. Morning light streamed through the curtains, touching her face, filled with guilt and a quiet relief. She murmured almost to herself. She was wrong. But maybe I wasn't completely right either. If Layla had heard those words, she might have broken down and cried. But the two women, standing on opposite sides of the same storm, had no idea their fates were already entwined, spiraling toward a twist neither could foresee. Tuesday morning. The sky over San Francisco hung heavy and grey. Thick clouds crawled past the Helios Tower, their reflections sliding down the glass facade like shadows over a crumbling empire. Inside the conference room on the 50th floor, the very heart of Helios Innovations' power, the air was dense, burnt out like ash after a fire. On the table lay stacks of emergency printouts, plummeting stock charts, hundreds of angry shareholder emails, and the front page of a magazine showing Layla Montgomery beneath a bright red headline, "The Most Powerful Woman in Silicon Valley and Her Greatest Fall." 12 seats around the table, all filled. No one spoke. Only the slow ticking of the wall clock counted down to her execution. The door opened. Layla entered. She wasn't wearing her usual power suit, just a white shirt and black slacks. Her hair neatly tied back. Her face was calm, her eyes sunken from sleepless nights. Every gaze in the room turned toward her, a mixture of fear, pity, and the silent distance of those who once worshipped her as a hero. "Thank you for coming," said David Chen, the veteran investor who had once believed in her when no one else did. His voice was deep, heavy with sadness. "Layla, we all know why we're here today." She sat at the head of the table. Fingers interlocked her voice, low but clear. "Because of a 47-second video." No one laughed. Michael, the chief operating officer, and her most trusted ally, slid a folder toward her. Not just the video. It's what came after stocks, down 18%, 2.5 billion in lost value partners pulling out, and a nationwide union strike. Helios is bleeding, Layla. "Helios isn't bleeding," she replied, her gaze unflinching. "It's losing courage. I built this company from nothing, not so it could tremble before a mob." Another board member, Karen Doyle, slammed her hand on the table. "Don't you get it? You're not fighting prejudice anymore. You're fighting the entire public, and you're dragging all of us down with you." Layla looked up, her voice, rough stripped of its former sharpness. "What do you want me to do? Apologize? Kneel before a camera so the world can feel comforted? Justice cannot be bought with fake tears." Karen's eyes hardened. "No one's asking you to kneel, Layla. We just want the company to survive. And for that to happen, you need to go." The words fell like a stone into still water. No one breathed. No one dared meet Layla's eyes. She smiled faintly, a smile without emotion. "I suppose this is the part where you all vote." David Chen nodded slowly, as if each word weighed a ton. "We'll proceed with emotion. Effective immediately, we propose to suspend Layla Montgomery's executive authority as Chief Executive Officer of Helios Innovations, reassigning her to the honorary role of Founder and Chief Visionary Officer, with no signing or operational rights." A long minute passed. Then, one by one, hands began to rise. Michael hesitantly, Karen firmly, one after another. 11 hands. David bowed his head. "I'm sorry." Layla looked around the room, exhaled softly. "No need to apologize. You're only protecting what I once taught you to value profit." Her voice was so calm it sent a chill through the air. The meeting ended after 15 minutes, but its echo lingered like a haunting. People filed out quietly, avoiding her eyes. Only Michael stayed behind. He stood there for a long moment before saying, "Layla, I didn't want this. But the company needs a new face." She looked at him gently. "I know. And I chose you as COO because I knew you could do what I couldn't. You mean, betray you." She shook her head slightly. "No. Survive." Michael turned away, unable to speak. When the door closed, the vast room was silent, except for the rain tapping against the windows. Layla sat again at the head of the table, the seat of leadership, the seat of her past. In front of her was a small nameplate, Layla Montgomery, Chief Executive Officer. She removed it and set it on the table, her hand trembling slightly. Once she whispered, "I lost everything because they underestimated me. Today I lose everything because I defied them." Her voice drifted into the empty room, blending with the sound of rain. 2 days later, Helios released an official statement. The company has appointed Mr. Michael Hale as Interim Chief Executive Officer. Ms. Layla Montgomery will transition to a creative advisory role focusing on community initiatives. The market responded immediately. The stock stopped falling. The press called it a wise move to restore public trust. Online people called it a fair price for arrogance. Layla read it all without expression. In her high-rise apartment, she sat watching the news ticker scroll across the television screen, from feminist icon to cautionary tale of power abuse. She gave a faint laugh. Icon. Cautionary tale. Whatever they need to make sense of me. Outside, the sunset painted the sky crimson, reflecting across her face. She thought of David Chen and his words, "Don't let justice turn into pride." She hadn't understood then. Now she did. Justice without compassion is just another form of control. That night, Layla quietly packed her office. The room that once buzzed with calls, plans, and ambition was now hollow. On her desk sat a photo of her and her team on Helios's IPO day, everyone smiling, arms raised in victory. She stared at it for a long time. A tear fell onto the glass, blurring her own smile in the picture. When security arrived, she said only one sentence. "No need to escort me. I know the way out." Layla walked down the long hallway, her reflection flickering across the glass walls. At the end, she paused before the large illuminated sign, Helios Innovations, the symbol she had built, now standing like a wall between her and the world. She touched the letters lightly and whispered, "Thank you for giving me everything. And thank you for taking it all back." Then she turned and walked away. Outside, night had settled over the city. The rain had stopped. The wind carried the faint salt of the bay. Layla walked beneath the streetlights. No entourage, no guards, no power. Only a solitary woman learning how to breathe again after the storm. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from an unknown number, room 214. They just received new funding from an anonymous donor. Thank you to whoever gave them hope. Layla pressed her lips together, said nothing. She looked up at the sky where the lights of airplanes blinked in the distance. A part of her had fallen apart. But another part, smaller, quieter, was just beginning to heal. After leaving Helios, Layla Montgomery disappeared from every headline. No more sensational titles, no more photographs of her stepping out of a car surrounded by flashing cameras. The world quickly found a new villain to condemn, while Layla slipped into the quiet void of being forgotten. The penthouse that had once been the stage for billion-dollar deals now felt unbearably vast. In the mornings, sunlight filtered through the blinds, illuminating the dusty desk where empires were once built. On it still sat a porcelain mug, engraved with the words, "Boss Lady," a gift from her employees the day Helios went public. She stared at it for a long moment, then gently slid it into a drawer, closing it, as though sealing away an entire lifetime. In the beginning, a few calls still came, reporters, former colleagues, investors. Then, one by one, they stopped. She deleted her social media accounts, wiped her work emails, keeping only one inbox to read what truly matters. But even that inbox stayed empty, until one Thursday morning when the notification pinged one new message. The sender, Ashley Whitaker. The subject line was simple. My mother asked me to send this. Layla opened it, her heartbeat slowing. Inside were only a few lines signed by Linda Whitaker. I don't know if you'll read this, but my husband, Edward, passed away last week. In his final days, he received the best care he ever had. The facility had new equipment, more rooms, and more nurses. The manager said it was thanks to an anonymous foundation. I know it was you. I'm not writing to forgive you, but to thank you for choosing to do the right thing, even if it came late. Layla read it again and again, silent tears falling down her cheeks. There were no more headlines, no more boardrooms, no more accusations. Only two women who had once hurt each other, now standing on opposite sides of a loss neither had wanted. She lifted her gaze to the window. The San Francisco sky was unusually clear. For the first time in months, she felt she could breathe deeply without feeling crushed by the weight of the past. Layla opened her laptop and began to type a reply. Thank you. I am not seeking forgiveness. But if even a small part of what I did brought peace to someone, then perhaps I still have a chance to be human. She pressed send. The glow of the screen reflected in her tearful eyes, no longer the glint of pride, but the quiet relief of a woman learning how to forgive herself. 1 year later, on a small building by the Oakland Bay, a new sign shimmered under the morning sun. The Phoenix Foundation. Inside, Layla Montgomery sat in a modest room filled with laughter. There were no walnut desks, no velvet carpets, no floor-to-ceiling glass walls, only worn wooden tables, walls covered in colorful sticky notes, and young people whose eyes carried a light she thought she had lost long ago, the belief that the world could still be better. She listened as a young, brown-skinned woman gave a presentation about a mobile app designed to distribute surplus food to the homeless. The girl's voice trembled slightly, her hands gripping the papers tightly. Layla smiled and said softly, I used to tremble like that too. But remember, an idea can only live if you dare to believe in yourself first. When the meeting ended, her assistant approached with a copy of the local newspaper. On the community page, a small headline read, Maplewood Hospice opens new care wing, funded by the Phoenix Foundation. Below it was a photograph of Linda Whitaker in a volunteer's uniform, holding the hand of an elderly patient, her smile gentle, yet weary. Layla set the paper down. She didn't speak. She simply looked out the window. Outside, the sky was clear and blue seagulls circling above the shimmering silver water. At last, she understood. True power didn't come from the ability to command, but from the capacity to give others the chance to rise. Not Helios, not the empire, but this small place. This was where she could begin rebuilding the world through compassion. That afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the bay, Layla stepped out onto the porch. The salty breeze swept through her hair, carrying the scent of freedom. She closed her eyes and whispered, Thank you for burning me so I could learn how to fly. And as the sunset reflected across the sign of the Phoenix Foundation, her shadow blended with the light, not as a symbol of power, but as a testament to rebirth. From the perspective of an expert in ethics and leadership culture, the journey of Layla Montgomery is not just a story about justice. It is a mirror reflecting a very real paradox of the modern world. When power is not guided by compassion, justice can easily become a weapon. Layla once had everything intelligence, status, control, but she had to lose it all to realize that true strength does not lie in the ability to make others fear you, but in the ability to make them believe in you. She once used power to punish, then used empathy to heal. And in the moment, she chose to rebuild instead of destroy Layla. Not only saved others, she redeemed herself. In a world where every tweet can become a verdict, her story reminds us that what matters is not who is right, but how we choose to do what is right. Sometimes, losing everything is not the end, but the chance to rediscover what matters most: dignity. If you believe that the greatest strength of humanity lies not in power, but in compassion and the courage to change, then like this video and subscribe to the channel to share more stories of courage and awakening. And before you go, leave a comment with the words that reflect your belief in what is right. Hold your dignity.